It takes a crane to build a crane. It takes 2 floors to make a story. It takes an egg to make a hen. It takes a hen to make an egg. There is no end to what I'm saying. It takes a thought to make a word. And it takes some words to make an action. And it takes some work to make it work. It takes some good to make it hurt. And it takes some bad for satisfaction. So the third song in the Pluck and Chuck guitar series is called Life is Wonderful by Jason Mraz, and it is a wonderful song indeed. I am so excited about this song because we are going to do our first chucking technique in this song. We are going to have chuck strums in this song. It's where we're using our thumb slap and we're flicking the fingers to strum a chord at the same time. And this is such a perfect song for teaching this because it moves very, very slowly, so it's really easy to change the chords. You got lots of time to get everything moved around. The right-hand pattern's really simple. It's such a perfect teaching song, and it happens to be an awesome song on top of that. I think Jason says this is one of his favorites, and I would agree with him. This is one of my favorite songs of his. So, yeah, I want to remind you that we have the lesson navigator below that will help you find the part of the lesson you need the most. First, there's a section on the left hand that will show you all the chords, and then there's a section on the right hand that will explain the chuck strums and the pattern for this song. And then there will be a section that puts the two together in a basic sort of way, and then at the very end I will show you the whole song played with singing going along with it. Also, there are tabs to go along with this lesson. You can go down into the navigator below to find the lesson page that will lead you to the tabs that are on songster.com, and that should be all the material you'll need. There's chord charts, lyrics, etc., all that stuff there. Alright, without further ado, let's get into it. So the first thing happening here is we have the capo on the 2nd fret. You can play this without the capo. Jason tends to play this with the capo on the 2nd fret, but he will do it both ways. It puts the song in G sharp minor, but I'm going to kind of explain it using F sharp minor terminology, because that's going to be sort of the chord shapes we're using. So for those of you with perfect pitch, sorry, this might be a little confusing, but I think most people will find this to be the easiest. Also, there's not too many chords to do in this song, but a lot of them are bar chords. So I'm going to give you a simplified version of every chord for those of you who are not quite so savvy with bar chords. But the way Jason plays it is with a lot of bar chords. So you should be able to do both ways when we're all done with this. And also, the one other thing to watch out for is every chord has got a bass note that goes with it. It's usually an open string that goes to a fingered note. So watch out for that as we're going along. I'll explain that as we go. So there's 2 chord progressions in this, and we're going to start with the one that is at the very beginning of the song. It's the verse progression. And the first chord is this F sharp minor. It's basically an E minor shape, played with your pinky and your ring finger up on the 2nd fret. But if you don't want to do the bar chord, you can sort of do an F sharp power chord, which would be pointer finger 2nd fret of the thick E string, ring finger 4th fret of the A string, and the pinky on the 4th fret of the D string. And what you would do to get the bass note is you lift your pointer finger up so that the thick E string is open, and then you put it back down. Play the chord. So there's your chord. 2nd chord is a B minor. And again, this one would be played as a bar chord. It's sort of like an A minor shape, raised up to the 2nd fret like that. If you want to get rid of the bar quality, all you have to do is sort of lift this finger, and so it's not barring, but you're using the pointer finger just down here on the 2nd fret of the A string. And if you only play these middle 4 strings, you should be in good shape. You won't actually have to play the bar chord. You're really just getting this one finger with the bar. And the bass note, just like on the last chord, you're sort of lifting the pointer finger so that you have the open A string. Next chord we have is a D major chord, and Jason plays it up here sort of as an A-shaped bar chord. I usually get this with my ring finger. I'll just bar these 3 and sort of curve it up at the end here like so. So so that it sort of mutes the thin E string. But some people, you can also kind of stick your pinky, bring the middle in there, or there's other ways to finger it, but I will tend to do it this way. This way works pretty well too. And for those of you who want to just play a regular open position D chord, that's absolutely fine too. If you're playing the bar chord, you'll do the same as you did with the other chords. You'll lift the pointer finger, so you'll have the open A string. And if you want to do the open position D, you'll do the thumb on the open A string and then the open D string. So you'll thumb this string and then this string. Either way, you're going to get the same sound. So see if you can put those three together real quick, just to make sure you've got it. And it sounds a little like this if you've gotten that far. It takes a crane to build a crane. It takes 2 floors to make a story. It takes an egg to make a hen. It takes a hen to make an egg. And as you get to that sort of second part of it, this D chord, it turns into a D minor chord. If you were up here on the 5th fret of the barring chord, you basically turn the A major shape into an A minor shape, so that would be pointer finger 5th fret of the A string. I use the ring finger on the, I guess that's the 7th fret of the D string. Pinky also on the 7th fret of the D string, and my middle finger on the 6th fret of the B string. That's up from where the capo is. And again, if you're doing D minor, you know, the D major just kind of, you switch the fingers and you got pointer finger 1st fret, ring finger 3rd fret of the B string, middle finger 2nd fret of the G string. Both of those are D minors. So you get that D major turning into D minor, or down here, D major turns into D minor. And then the D minor chord is going to go to an A chord. From up here, this shape just sort of moves over one string. You go from the sort of A minor shape, you just move everything over towards the thicker strings. And you have this A major chord in the 5th fret. It's basically your E major shape moved up to the 5th fret. And just like the other one, you could kind of lift this so you don't have to bar these top 2 strings, and all you have is the pointer finger on the thick E string. And same thing, you're just kind of lifting the pointer finger to get the open low E string for your bass note. Or, again, open position A chord here works too. And just as you were doing with the D chord, you're like thumbing the thick E string and then the A string for your bass notes. This note and then this note in a row. And then that's the whole verse progression, so I'll kind of talk through it real quick with the vocals, the whole thing. It takes a crane to build F sharp minor. It takes up 2 floors to make B minor. It takes an egg to make a D. It takes a hen to make a D minor. There is no end to the A major. And then as it turns around, it's going to do a regular open position E major chord, and then start at the very top again. It takes a thought to make F sharp minor again. It takes some words to make minor. It takes some work to make it D. It takes some good to make D minor. It takes some bad for A major, and then E major to turn it around. You see, I used the open position fingerings the second time, but the chords were exactly the same. So you could really use either one of those to get through, whichever one you feel a little better about. And then, after you've got that, that's the verse all the times through that you do it. If you play the bridge, those are the changes you use for the bridge. And then we're on to the chorus. So once you've got the verse changes down, then you are ready for the chorus changes, which are very, very similar to the verse changes. You'll see when we do the right hand later, they go by a little faster, but same thing. Start out on an F sharp minor chord, just like before. And then you're over to a B minor. And rather than going up, you're going to go down to this open position E major chord, and then an A. And then there's a little bass fill that goes in between. you start by playing the open A string, 2nd fret of the A string, open A string again, ring finger on the 4th fret of the thick E string, and then pointer finger on 2nd fret of the thick E string. You're back to the top. And that sounds sort of like... In context, it goes a little faster. One more time. Sounds kind of like that. And then that little 4-chord loop happens again. It's the same thing. 2nd time F sharp minor, same B minor we had before, E major. And actually, rather than going to the A the 2nd time, it just kind of hits the E one more time and then stops. So, so if I sing along with that, we'd be F sharp minor, la la la, B minor is wonderful, E major, la, life, A major goes full circle, F sharp minor, B minor, wonderful, E major, yeah. And that's the chorus. It's pretty simple, and especially if you've gotten the verse down so far, you should get it pretty quickly. So that's really all there is for the left hand. I'll start to show you how it goes with the right hand. So the right hand pattern for this song isn't too tricky, but the first thing you got to have down is this chuck strumming technique. And for those of you who want to know, I'm going to hold an E major chord in the right hand, and the chuck strum looks kind of like this. You're just sort of rotating your hand just a little bit and doing the slap just like we were doing before, planting the thumb, but you're also flicking your fingers at the same time to strum a chord. And this takes a little bit of time to coordinate, so why don't you take a second, pick any chord you want. If you want to play along with me, take an E major chord, and just, you're planting your thumb on the thick E string, and just do that a couple times. I'll just count a couple of bars of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Once you're comfortable with that motion, that you're opening the hand a little bit, the thumb's kind of coming out and it's planting on whatever string you're aiming at, then what you want to try to do is be able to move it to different strings. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do an E major chord first for the thumb on the thick E string. I'll do an A major chord when my thumb is on the A string, and I'll do a D major chord when my thumb is on the D string. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do 4 chuck strums on each. And then I'm going to go up from the thick E string to the A string to the D string, and then back down to the thick E string, so that I know I can move my thumb around to different strings as I'm doing this. So this is a really good exercise to do, and it's also a good time to practice your volume and how shallow your stroke is. If you have noticed, if you have kind of a shallow finger stroke, you'll just hit a few strings. If you really stretch the finger out, you'll get all the strings. So mess with it. Try to get some stuff like that under your control as you do this. So I'll count you in and we'll get into it. 1, 2, 3, 4. A major. D major. A major. E major. And you can do any chords you want with that, but the key is you want to be able to move the thumb between different strings fluidly. And once you're comfortable with that chuck strum, once the motion feels sort of natural to you, then we're going to put it in with the pattern. And the pattern really just adds a couple of little thumb plucks in. That's really all there is to it. So over an E major chord, you'd have a thumb stroke, your chuck stroke, and then another thumb stroke that leads back to the beginning of the cycle. And if I count it out, it sounds sort of like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and... So you'll notice there's a, right before the 2 and the 4, there's an extra thumb stroke kind of leading to it. 1, and 2, and 3. 1, and 2, and 3. So that little 2 thumb strokes right next to each other is a little trick to get in there. So now why don't we try to integrate that across the different strings. What we'll do is we'll again do an E major chord, to an A major chord, to a D chord, and then back down. We'll go back down through the A and down to the E. Except now we're doing... And you'll do that sort of second stroke right before the downbeat on the string that you were on, and then that thumb stroke that follows right after on the downbeat will be on the next string. So I'll count in and we'll try this exercise. 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and A major, and 3, and D major, A major, E major. And if you can get through that sort of thing where you're moving around the thumb between strings and you've still got... then you're definitely ready to put it together with the left hand chords for this song. So now we are ready to put the left and right hand together. So if you were following along so far, you remember that there's these bass notes going on right before you play every chord. At the very beginning of the song, you're just going to hit the first note. It takes a crane to build a crane. That's a funky bass note, but as soon as you get into that pattern, you're always lifting whatever your pointer finger is doing to get that bass note. So just be aware of that as we're going along. So we're starting out, we're on this F sharp minor chord, and we're going to play the pattern that we had over it. Play the pattern 4 times, and on the 4th time we plant the thumb on the open A string because we're going to play that to get into the B minor chord. So there's a couple times when you're going to have to anticipate where you're going to land your thumb with the chuck to get to the next chord. So with this B minor chord, we play it 4 times just like we did the F sharp minor chord. 1, 2, 3, 4. You can keep your thumb on the A string because that's going to play the open A string, and then your pointer finger is going to play whatever note it plays for the D. So 2 notes on the D, and then we switch to D minor for 2 patterns, and then you've got to plant your thumb on the thick E string to play the E bass for the A chord. If you play it down here or up here, doesn't matter. Either way, the thick E string is going to be your bass note for the A chord. So that one's got to be anticipated too. And you play the A twice, and you just kind of whack the E. You whack the E and you mute it. So if you go over that whole thing slowly with the words, I will show you how that goes now. It takes a crane to build a crane. F sharp minor. 2, 3. It takes 2 floors to make a story. 4 and B minor. It takes an egg to make a handy. It takes a hand to make an egg. D minor. There is no end to what I'm saying. A. Whack the E. Now, one thing I haven't mentioned up to this point, but I've showed you how to do this in other videos, you're going to use the left hand to kind of mute the chords to give a staccato effect. So when you do your chuck strum, you kind of lift your left hand a little bit to stop the notes, and you don't want to lift it too far. You really just want to lift it just enough to stop the notes. You can probably hardly even see it, but you can see my hand sort of relaxes. Rather than pushing down the strings, it's going to mute them, and it's going to make the notes shorter. And you're going to do that for pretty much every chord in the song that you can. So be aware of that as we go along. So let's go over that verse piece one more time, and then I'm going to go into the chorus. It takes a thought to make a word, and it takes some words to make an action, and it takes some work to make it work. It takes some good to make it hurt. It takes some bad for satisfaction. And a lot of times when he's coming out of the second part of the verse, he'll do a sort of arpeggio. He really sort of brushes the strings one at a time with his thumb. And that kind of lightly brings you into the chorus. So with that being the verses, let's go on to how the chorus goes. The chorus doesn't have any chords that play the full pattern 4 times. Everything is pretty much 2 times with the right hand pattern, and then you're on to the next chord. So it's F sharp minor, twice, and right into B minor, twice. And you kind of thumb the thick E string just twice in a row. There's no bass note for this one. It's just E, E, chord, E, E, chord. And then what you do to get to the A chord, you play the thick E string again, and then the open A string to pluck the A. So I'll show you that second part real quick. E, 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 A. And then you're into that fill riff. And then back into the top of the progression. So let me show you how that goes with the words. Ah, la 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 la, life is wonderful. Ah, la 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 la, life goes full circle. Ah, la 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 la, life is wonderful. Ah, la 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 la. And then he'll either brush that E chord or he'll brush it and mute it real quick. Or he'll do something to that effect. There's a couple of possibilities there, but he'll just end it on the E chord. And then you're right back into the verses again. It takes a night to make it dawn. And there aren't really too many variations he does, at least when he plays it live. So really that's all there is to it, if you want to play this song and sing along with it. So let's go to the full playthrough. It takes a crane to build a crane. It takes 2 floors to make a story. It takes an egg to make a hen. It takes a hen to make an egg. There is no end to what I'm saying. It takes a thought to make a word, and it takes some words to make an action, and it takes some work to make it work. It takes some good to make it hurt, and it takes some bad for satisfaction. Singing la 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 la, life is wonderful. Ah, la 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 la, life goes full circle. Ah, la 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 la, life is wonderful. Ah, la 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 la, life goes full circle. Ah, la 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 la, life is wonderful. Ah, la 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 la.